The Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty in China were two of the most important empires during the latter part of Big Era 4. Two of the largest and longest lasting, and they were around at about the same time and also had some significant connections with each other via Silk Road and other trade. Both Imperial Rome and Han China lasted approximately 400 years in their overall time, and both had populations of about 50 million. Again, Imperial Rome located here in the west around the Mediterranean, and Han China located here in present-day China and East Asia. Han China built on earlier imperial traditions started by the Qin and Zhou dynasties, taking over those territories and expanding out beyond them, whereas Rome built on aristocratic landlords, expanding out from the city-state in central Italy, eventually controlling all of Italy, and then the larger Mediterranean area. Both empires were heavily militarized and emphasized territorial expansion. Perceived threats to security led to wars and conquests of neighbors, which only increased then the length of the borders and led more to more perceived threats beyond those borders, which led to more conquests. So this led to the great expansion of both territories of each empire. Agriculture was the base of wealth in the economy, and therefore land equaled wealth. Government revenue was based on a percentage of the annual harvest in each empire. Integrating the empires was key, and infrastructure was key to doing this. Massive road building projects linked crucial parts of both empires. Roads facilitated communication, allowed for economic activity and trade, access to resources that could be brought across the empire, and of course movement in the military in a quick and efficient way. Rome also of course invented concrete and used it in engineering feats like aqueducts. Of course, political integration was important for both empires. In China, the philosophy of Confucianism was key to this. Confucianism identified principles necessary for political and social order. It emphasized the emperor's divine majesty, his links to heaven, and the morality through correct ritual, such as ancestor veneration. Also, as part of this, the development of sophisticated bureaucracy within China, with government officials across provinces staffed by people of the middle classes, created loyalty to the emperor. The Imperial Academy, which was created during this time, and the exam system meant that all areas of China were cohesive and Confucian. In the Roman Empire, the bureaucracy was less complex than the Han, although it was still very large. It relied very much on local elites of the conquered territories and the middle class to control the provinces. Greater emphasis in Rome was placed on law codes created and a common legal system. Monuments and triumphal processions also played up the glory of the empire and its rulers, as well as the cult of the deceased emperors. Later in Rome, further integration happened with the spread of Christianity. Key to this as well was the ideas around citizenship and colonies. Large colonies of ethnically Han or Northern Chinese people from the central area of the empire were planted in these newly conquered territories. The use of Mandarin, the Han language, required the elite and the bureaucrats, was required of them in order to integrate the country. Also, again, the ideology of Confucianism was enforced by the central authority. Rome also used colonies to foster unity and integration throughout the empire. Colonies were basically military outposts, not intended for population integration, although that happened at various times. Latin was very much encouraged throughout the empire and became predominant in the west, but never overtook Greek in the east, where people still very much looked up more so to Greek culture. Expansion of Roman citizenship beyond the people of just Rome and Italy to other parts of the empire was given for army service, but in general, there was much more loose control and more local autonomy. Overall, compared to any previous empires, both the Roman and Han governments had much more expanded central power. Both systems expanded the functions of government to work with the people and work for the people. They used bureaucracy and taxation to provide cities with needs and increased coercion with the military. Both governments were actively engaged in economic activity designed to ensure and stabilize the local order, making sure that the economies were running well and fairly. One example of this is the Han government held a monopoly on the trade of salt and iron, making sure that it was always available. Again, territorial expansion was key to the government power in both Han China and Imperial Rome, but in the end played out a bit differently. The Han pushed the boundaries of China far beyond the Qin homeland, but when they reached a sustainable point, did not feel the need to compensate for the cessation of expansion. The Chinese labor force was not reliant on slavery. They had a large peasant population that made constant expansion less necessary. In contrast, Imperial Rome had a more militaristic culture overall. The Romans needed additional territory to pay their soldiers for their military service, and they also needed a continuing supply of slaves for their labor system, which they brought in from the conquered territories. Both societies were dominated by a patriarchy, male-dominated society. Reverence for fathers was key. Both focused on the veneration of ancestors, but much more so with the Han. The Han was also saw the family as the model of organization for the state, again based on Confucian ideas. Loyalty to a father was seen in a similar way as loyalty to the emperor. Early on, both empires focused on rituals and themes that would bring loyalty to the empire, but neither was intensely spiritual. Confucianism was more of a philosophy, and of course, the Roman religion, its polytheistic nature, wasn't particularly focused on spiritualism as part of that. But later on, in both empires, both were exposed to new religions late in the classical period, Buddhism in China and Christianity in Rome. Again, after about 4 centuries, both Imperial Rome and Han China declined. Overexpansion led to invasions by nomadic pastoralists. In the case of Rome, it was Germanic tribes and Hun invaders from the north and the east. In the case of China, it was invaders from Central Asia and the north attacking as well. The tax base was weakened as well as the land was concentrated to fewer hands who paid less and less in taxes. Right, so growing disparity between the very, very wealthy and the remaining of the middle class and the poor. In the Roman Empire falls. Western Roman cultural elements died out in many places of the empire, although some continued on, certainly through the church. Of course, the Eastern Roman Empire, centered around Byzantium, continued on for another 1,000 years. In China, Han Dynasty was destroyed, but its institutions and traditions were revived by later dynasties, leading to continuity.